This week's episode of the Today in Manufacturing podcast is brought to you by SugarCRM. If your sales team is struggling to close deals, SugarCRM can introduce you to modern, insight-driven sales. Energize your CRM with Sugar. Hi, I'm David Manti, and welcome to a new episode of the Today in Manufacturing podcast. With me this week are Jeff Reinke and Anna Wells. We each have more than 20 years of experience covering the manufacturing industry. Every week, we take the 5 most popular stories on our websites and discuss the implications they have on the industry going forward. Before we get started, please make sure to like, share, and subscribe to the podcast. You can also help us out a lot by giving the podcast a positive review on Apple Podcast or whatever platform you use. If you want to email the podcast, you can reach any of us at Anna, Jeff, or David at IN.com with email the podcast in the subject line. You can also subscribe to our daily newsletter. Make sure you get it delivered to your inbox first, and make sure to subscribe to us on YouTube at IEN Magazine so you can get a notification whenever we go live. Jeff, how are you doing this week?
Pretty good, David.
Yeah?
Pretty good.
Pretty good. I'll take it. You know, it's nice.
About to get even better.
That is so super, Jeff. I'm happy for you and for all of us to be able to share that with you.
Excellent.
Anna, equally chipper?
Yeah, hard to beat that one, but yes, I am excited.
I think that Jeff is maybe like overcompensating for his sheer exhaustion, because if he feels at all like I do, like I've just got like a full body exhaustion where it's just like, just sit down, you know, like maybe we could do the podcast sitting this week.
It was a rather intense softball game last night.
Mm-hmm. It was
high energy.
You know, like there's one play in particular where we missed each other by about like 2 inches, and like if not for those 2 inches, Anna, you're filming with Nolan and Munson tonight. All right. Well, before we get into our first story this week, we have a word from our sponsor, SugarCRM. This week's episode is brought to you by our friends at SugarCRM. If your sales team is struggling to close deals, you need to read How to Close More Deals in Manufacturing, a new guide to modern, insight-driven sales. Many manufacturers sit on mountains of data about their customers. However, few sales teams leverage all this data to unlock new sales opportunities, boost pipeline output, strengthen customer relationships, and realize complementary sales add-ons. Stop missing out on new sales and download How to Close More Deals in Manufacturing right now. There is a link in the body copy as well as the live chat. Let's jump into our first story this week. NTSB reveals fuel leak in American Airlines engine fire. On March 13th, 2025, an American Airlines flight left Colorado Springs Airport and was headed to Dallas-Fort Worth. The plane was quickly diverted to Denver after the crew noticed high engine vibrations. But then, the plane's right engine caught fire at the gate. The NTSB traced the problem to a fuel leak and several improperly installed parts. A part inside the right engine of the Boeing 737-800 was loose and had been installed in the wrong direction. Oh, and fuel was leaking from an entirely different part that was fastened incorrectly. The NTSB still hasn't identified the ignition source of the fire, and the investigation is ongoing, but it just might be the whole leaking fuel hot engine combination that made things go bad. Former NTSB and FAA investigator Jeff Gazzetti read the report and told the Associated Press, quote, "To me, it looks like improper maintenance in the right engine leading to a fuel leak. To make matters worse, when the fire broke out, the crew tried to evacuate the plane, but the escape slide malfunctioned and jammed the door." Anna, just a host of problems with this aircraft, and more bad news likely to come as the investigation is ongoing. I guess at least everyone made it out relatively safely with just a few minor injuries.
Yeah, true, which is incredible when you look at all of the drama that took place in this very short period of time where this fire began. And I think, maintenance issues aside, is terrifying to consider what an absolute breakdown took place during this evacuation.
Oh, yeah.
So you mentioned the slide getting jammed up and causing that door to be unable to open. The other thing that the report said was that flight attendants tried to reach the cockpit and knocked on the cockpit door and I think called, and there was no answer from the pilots. So the report said that then the flight attendants and then the passengers themselves initiated this evacuation, which was hampered by this issue with the slide. So some reports have said that passengers were fleeing, via those exits and slides, but others had climbed onto the wing amid the billowing smoke. And so it sounds like it was a very dramatic scene. You kind of wonder if some of those injuries were people just, getting off the wing maybe or falling.
Getting off the wing, maybe being trampled. Crazy.
Yeah. So, it was not a good look in many ways. We know this plane was a Boeing 737. The fingers are not being pointed at Boeing. In this case, of course, they're talking about how this was an issue with the airline maintenance procedures. But between that and I think the debacle that occurred during the evacuation, it's clear that I think public confidence when it comes to airline incidents is shaken a bit lately. Yeah. And then this does not help that, right? So, I read a report in TTW that said, despite the relatively low incident rates that were, occur in aviation and in airplanes, it's still relatively safe, right, to this point. But they say even small errors, loose wires, inverted fittings, misfastened parts can cascade into potentially catastrophic outcomes. And American Airlines, FAA, and NTSB face a pivotal moment to tighten protocols. That's what they say. When you take the manufacturing angle on this, obviously not a Boeing problem. This impacts Boeing just as much as it would have if it were,
Yeah.
And unfortunately, that's just the game, right? I mean, the airlines and the manufacturers are so inextricably linked here that one of them makes a mistake, it's reflected on the other in sales and, people's confidence and all of it. So Boeing, unfortunately, for not being involved, is going to pay a heavy price for this as well.
Well, and I feel like this is one of those stories where the people open the story initially, skim until they see what was the aircraft manufacturer and kind of start there. And then, they see Boeing 737-800 and they're like, oh, starting to make sense already.
Another Boeing problem, right?
Yeah. And so this hits close to home for me, a couple of reasons. One, we're supposed to travel in August, and I'm getting kind of pushback on the buying airplane tickets because it's like, maybe we'll just drive. And I'm like, it's fine. It's as safe as it's always been. It's just more publicized right now. But it's just like, and then something like this happens again. And you're just like, okay, we'll wait a couple more weeks. And the other was that I was leaving a music festival with friends once, and I was on a bus. We were on the back of the bus, and all of a sudden we saw smoke on the front of the bus. Someone yelled fire, and everyone from the front started rushing to the back to try and get the emergency door open, and we couldn't get the emergency door open. So I know that fear of what it's like to all of a sudden be stuck and thinking like worst case scenario is going to happen, and it is terrifying. And I couldn't imagine being on a plane. At least I was just like, I'm going out the window. I mean, it didn't come to that. We eventually got the door open, but I know that fear when all of a sudden you see smoke, someone yells fire, everyone stands up and just starts coming rushing at you. Like it is terrifying. Jeff, when you look at the story and, it was an opportunity to get into an NTSB report. So there are a couple of fun details and not fun details, but, a little bit more technical details. They really stress that the investigation continues. What other things do you think might come out of this? I mean, one of them has got to be maintenance protocols and how things can get missed, like being installed backwards. I just can't imagine that can happen on an aircraft.
When we look at these types of stories, and there's been more of them lately, it's always focusing in on, from a manufacturing perspective, quality controls in the production process, all of that. One thing we haven't probably talked enough about is really the airline operational environment and things that are going on there. So looking at a couple different sources here, the Bureau of Transportation Statistics, as well as a report from McKinsey talking about just airline operations and investment. A couple things cannot be denied here. Number one, fewer flights than before. But on these flights, way more people
Yeah.
than ever before. The other thing that we've got going on here is there's a greater focus on on-time departures.
Oh, yeah.
Okay. Because there's a direct correlation between on-time departures, on-time arrivals, and airline profitability.
Mm-hmm.
It wasn't that long ago when collectively the airlines were losing like $30 billion a year. They've realized, hey, if we actually get people to where they want to go on time, we make more money.
Yeah.
Therefore, what this has led to is much shorter turnaround times on all of these planes.
Mm-hmm.
These planes, on average, are about 2 years older than they've ever been before, which feeds into the whole backlog thing that we've been talking about from forever.
Yeah.
So there's that dynamic. But when they're trying to turn these planes around, right now it's an average of about 44 minutes. They're trying to get that down to 30 so that they can, again, improve their on-time or departures and arrivals.
Wow.
That's how this stuff happens.
Yeah.
When you've got older planes with a heavier load. I mean, we think about planes, we don't always think about more people and what that means, but it's just like any other piece of machinery.
Yeah.
If it's got heavier load and it's doing more, it's going to break down sooner.
Yeah.
And if we're trying to turn these planes around more quickly to make more money, this is the type of stuff that gets overlooked. We're putting in parts backwards.
Yeah.
I mean, we're not doing the right things. We're not doing our blocking and tackling like we need to,
Right.
from a maintenance perspective. So when we look at all of these standards and the things that we need to start addressing, the airlines have to play a much bigger part in this, and they have to set up their operation. So yeah, we want them to make money, but man, they can't be overlooking this, and they can't create a culture where it's almost where the functionality is surpassing safety. That just can't continue. And that's what's happening right now. There's no doubt about that.
Don't you think,
go
sorry,
ahead.
I was just going to say, don't you think generally too right now, that is the culture that we're in, which is why is everything so slow? Why is everything so costly? Let's cut the red tape. And, people who don't understand.
Sometimes the red tape's there for a reason.
Is there for a reason.
Yeah.
And, people are so exhausted by bloat or whatever they determine that to be. But, it's, again, those are safeguards.
These turnaround times, this isn't inefficiency. This is taking your time to make sure it's done correctly.
Well, and I mean, older aircraft, they don't have some of the tools that modern aircraft have on them to flag some of these potential issues. Aviation is going through the same problem with maintenance personnel, trying to find people, having a brain drain when it comes to people retiring and not being able to find people with the same skill set or train them up. Because I was curious, what exactly went wrong here. So first of all, the lock wire of the fuel fitting was loose and installed in the incorrect direction. Now you use a lock wire fuel fitting with a thin wire to secure the fitting and prevent it from loosening during like vibration or other stresses. So it was like just this tiny wire that basically keeps it locked in. That was in the wrong direction. And I mean, that's something too, like, you're just working too fast? What is the cause of that? The variable stator vane actuator rod end was incorrectly fastened and secured to the variable stator vane actuator, allowing fuel to leak from the fitting. And this is a rod that helps adjust airflow through the compressor at various engine speeds. There were also fractured welds, blocked seals, and I really don't think we're paying enough attention to the fact that the slide didn't deploy, and really, we have no idea why that happened. Basically, they're like, we sent it back to the manufacturer. Hopefully, they let us know why. Like, that is crazy to me. Like, one thing that when I'm on a flight, I'm just like, well, if we land in the water, I know where where the flotation device is, and if things go bad, I know I get out that door and on the slide. And like when you have so few safety, I guess, ways out of a bad situation, and then one goes wrong and you can't necessarily trust that anymore, that makes you lose faith as a consumer. I don't know. It's I like that there was a little bit more insight into this story, but I would like to see what comes, especially from the slide manufacturer. Hopefully, it's not just like, oh, it was an anomaly and it'll never happen again. We swear. Super promise, double promise. All right. Our next most popular story. Orbic hopes to bring 1,000 tech jobs back to U.S. soil. Orbic Electronics Manufacturing is a designer and manufacturer of consumer devices. Cell phones, laptops, wearables, tablets, mobile hotspots, all made in Long Island. The company recently announced a new 135,000 square foot expansion. Orbic expects this plant, known as, quote, Project Patriot, to bring more than 1,000 manufacturing jobs from overseas to the United States. The investment includes retrofitting its existing 60,000 square foot facility and building an additional 75,000 square foot space. The company hopes to make 5 million devices annually at this factory. Orbic wants to reduce its reliance on overseas production and bring a greater portion of its supply chain under domestic control. The project received $10 million in tax credits from New York State. Next, the company plans to open 3 more plants and create a total of these 1,000 jobs over the next 5 years. Jeff, if you can believe it, Orbic says employees of all levels will also receive training at the beginning of their employment period free of charge.
Very generous to show people how to do the job that they've been hired to do.
So
Very kind.
Excellent.
Yeah.
That's excellent.
Have you ever heard of non-free training?
I'm trying to think of, unless there's some sort of certification that we can put our fingers on here. I don't know. Yeah.
It was bold to say.
Yeah.
And you know what? We're going to do it this one time. This one time, if you sign up now within the next 30 minutes, free training.
Hey, it's, I don't know where to go with that. And looking at this story, when we look at what Orbic does, where they're doing it, what they're trying to accomplish here, I'm really trying to be optimistic.
Mm-hmm.
I think there's some concerns long-term here, potentially with this company and putting some money into it, but there is some good things going on here. The first of which, this is actually not a new project. This Project Patriot actually goes back to January of last year when they initially invested like $31 million into that initial sort of rehabbing that initial facility that they're now in.
Yeah.
So there is something that they're building on essentially. They also recently acquired a company called Sonim Technologies, which is basically like a heavy duty, like a smartphone for the plant floor.
Oh, okay.
Built for, more durable, rugged. That's what I was looking for.
Yeah.
They've also come into a recent agreement with a semiconductor manufacturer, GCT, which is based out of San Jose. So they're trying to source chips here from the U.S. and grow production here. These are all great things. It's still a less expensive phone.
Yeah.
A lot of their devices, again, their position is a lower priced option for a lot of the stuff that they do, and they have come under some criticism for the level of quality. Now, that said, they're putting this money into it. They're looking to hire a lot of people, so you would hope some of those things go hand in hand. These agreement, this new acquisition, the agreement with GCT, all of this stuff can hopefully help bolster not only just their throughput, but also their product quality. They've been doing it a little bit longer. So you want to be optimistic on all these fronts that ideally maybe there's a blueprint here that we can put forward for a US-based consumer electronics company. Yeah. Now, the challenges they're still going to face is all the components that are going inside to keep these products lower cost. They're probably coming from overseas. So there's going to be some challenges there as well in growing. They've talked about this 1,000 new jobs, again, for about a year and a half. Yeah. So they've had a little bit of a runway and leading up to this. Hopefully they can keep the momentum going. They are successful. They do have, 60-some people I think they employ right now, $100 million in sales. So there's stuff to build on here.
Yeah.
Can they actually meet a lot of these very, very lofty goals? I think that's going to be interesting to see. I think when you talk about going from 60 to 1,000 employees, that's a big, big swing in a very, very tough market. So I am rooting for these guys. We want this to work out, but I think this is one of those situations that it's worth looking at and maybe measuring our expectations a little bit from some of the things that have been put out there.
Yeah, my expectations went from like, no way, to like, oh, I don't know, when I saw the timing, right? So the plan started to develop around the pandemic. And I don't know if it did the same for you, but like to me, I was just like, I saw this and I was like, money grab, right? But then I saw that it was rooted back in all the supply chain issues that people encountered during the pandemic, not being able to get specific products that are sourced from overseas, and then starting to put the plan together back then. To me, that gave it a little bit more credibility. I don't know. Did it do the same for you?
I don't know. This one is, I'm struggling with this one because a lot of electronics manufacturing, and especially assembly, is taking place overseas currently for a reason, right? And it appears our national strategy right now is to raise the cost of global production to the point where it's cost comparable to do it here. But to reiterate, that means a less cost-effective choice is being made than what was available before. So every celebratory post about reshoring, I think, needs to consider whether this reshoring is taking place under the duress of, a tariff environment. And if so, then you're almost certainly going to get a more expensive product out of it.
Yeah.
So if their, competitive advantage is it's a lower cost product, can they sustain that pricing, adding these costs of domestic production? I don't know. And not to further dump cold water on this, but I think the secondary issue too is like if you look at, I don't know how to say the name of the city in New York, Hoppage?
Hoppage. Yeah.
Okay, so that's a city of about 20,000 people in New York State. If you look on Indeed right now, they have nearly 800 vacant manufacturing jobs listed in this 20,000 person city alone. A recent study by the Cato Institute found that while 80% of Americans agreed that America would be better off if more people worked in manufacturing, just 25% of Americans agreed that they would be better off personally working in manufacturing. This led the Financial Times to title this coverage, "Manufacturing, Someone's American Dream, Just Not Mine."
Yeah.
But, it's like this is a significant barrier, know, and I've said it before, and I know you guys give me a hard time about this, but
you're not sliding into your anti-job rhetoric. You're just being a realist.
I'm trying to be real.
Yeah.
Because I think we need to refocus this narrative around reshoring manufacturing jobs. We don't need jobs that are not going to be filled, right? Like that's not a value to anyone.
It's just adding to the tally.
It is. And they have to be competitive. And, I saw this stat recently. Wells Fargo picked this up from the Bureau of Labor Statistics. This was this month. They said that currently workers in the manufacturing sector earn less than 90 cents on the dollar compared to all other private employers. Like that is a problem.
Yeah.
And I feel like we're trying to do a workaround on this problem and just shoving jobs at states and like this, incentivizing the buildup of this industry when we have not solved A, the perception problem, B, it sounds like there's a problem with pay. And so just to kind of ignore those and blindly produce jobs and continue to do so, I just think the problem continues to build. And I'm not convinced that electronics assembly is the type of manufacturing job that Americans want. I don't know if those are jobs that, it would depend on what they're going to pay for those jobs. But again, a lot of competition in the region. So to me, it's a difficult sell and trying to understand how they're going to do that.
What about the idea of, as of May 2024 last year, they did about $100 million in sales and had 60 employees, and they are going to grow to 1,000.
Well, the one thing they do have working for them, they do have distribution through Verizon and a couple of other pretty well-known, I guess, retailers, resellers, whatever you want to say. So there is some optimism there. To Anna's point, I think the biggest thing is, again, they're going to have to pay these folks, what does that do to their price model? Yeah. Because right now, that's kind of what they compete on. They've got the flip phones, like no bells and whistles. This is basically just a phone. And if that's what you want, you're in good shape. That's not kind of where the market is right now, though. So I'm not sure how this plays out and how they're able to ramp up. To your point about the money grab, I think they're legitimately trying to do the right things here.
Oh, yeah.
I don't think there's anything like, selfishly just trying to glom onto any of these funds, but it's something we want to celebrate, but then you start looking at it more pragmatically and it's like, oh boy, it's a hard one.
Tall order.
Yeah.
Well, and the project was never contingent on this $10 million. And the state is very well protected to be able to kind of try and claw back that money if these job goals aren't hit. But I'll say going through the company's website, there were a lot of things that I found interesting at first, right? I have kind of been talking more and more about how I'm interested in, trading my smartphone for a dumb phone, and going through their site. I'm like, oh, they sell dumb phones, I could just go back to that old flip phone. But then you see that these generic alternatives that they offer have some issues. And you kind of alluded to it, Jeff, but the screens are freezing. They're unresponsive touch screens. They have general problems connecting to Wi-Fi. They have problems charging. They have other battery problems. They have call quality issues. And I was just like, oh, well, that's difficult. I get it. You're always going to need a low-cost alternative, but for you to be sustainable, it also needs to be reliable long term. You know, like you can always make that sale once. I mean, it's whether or not you can make it again. A little bit about the company. It is kind of a cool story because the company is owned by Mike Narula, who is the chief executive, and his wife, Ashima, also owns the company. I pulled this quote from Martin Cantor. He's the director of a think tank, the Center for Socioeconomic Policy. He was interviewed by the Long Island Press. And he said, quote, "Bringing any jobs to Long Island is unusual. But it remains to be seen what happens. Long Island is not a great haven for manufacturing. How are you going to afford a workforce when people can't afford to live here? I'd have to see this first." So it has its share of skeptics out there, but I think those are real questions. And I mean, this isn't unique to Long Island, right? I mean, this is a problem that we have here in Madison, right? Where people are getting priced out of the region because it's so expensive to live here. I can't imagine what that scale is like in Long Island right now, and supporting that kind of lifestyle on those wages that you were talking about, 90 cents on a dollar, Anna. Like, again, a lot of the deck seems stacked against this one.
A lot of unknowns, yeah.
Let's hope we're wrong.
Yeah, true. We're like rooting for it. We're just, reading the cards that we're playing the cards we're dealt. All right, our next most popular story. P&G to cut 7,000 jobs amid economic uncertainty. Over the next 2 years, Procter & Gamble will cut up to 7,000 jobs, some 6% of its global workforce. The maker of Cadillac brands like Tide and Pampers is struggling with tariff-related costs and customers keeping a tighter squeeze on their wallets. The Cincinnati-based company has some 108,000 employees. The cuts make up about 15% of its current non-manufacturing workforce. P&G is entering restructuring mode, including ending product lines in specific markets, though more details on the sunsetting aren't going to come out until next month. Jeff, is P&G just the latest domino to kind of fall as companies prep for this uncertain global trade landscape?
Whoa! Man, I don't know. What, can you say that again? No.
Yeah. No, but I wanted to like set up dominoes and just like, and then the one just slowly falls off the table.
I don't know if it's a domino, but I think it's a familiar theme, I guess.
Yeah.
P&G had a rough last quarter. Sales were definitely down. And when you talk about 2% for a global company like Procter & Gamble, that's a huge number. Mm-hmm. That registers. So when you're looking at that, and they're talking about tariffs here impacting material costs, and that's driving up prices, that's fair. But I don't think that's their biggest issue. I think where tariffs are coming in, and we've talked about this a lot, is the generic equivalents that they're now competing against more prominently than they were before, because prices are higher, because people are looking at those things more closely. On average, when you look at some of these P&G brands, they're as much as 40% more as either a lower priced or generic equivalent. So when you've got that dynamic, and then you can throw in the fact that Procter & Gamble has come under a lot of criticism for sort of relying on the legacy of these brands and not trying to appeal to the next generation of buyers.
Yeah.
From a marketing perspective, that's a dangerous mix. And you can talk about tariffs all you want, but if you're not inspiring or really speaking to the next generation of individuals who are buying Pampers and Tide and everything else, your sales are going to fall.
Yeah.
So you've got a couple of different issues here that you also need to deal with. But and then on top of that, you have the thing everyone's dealing with, which is material prices going up through tariffs. So there's the uncertainty element of it, but then there's also the reality that you got a new level of competition to deal with as well. And I think that's what they're really feeling right now.
Well, they had the Tide Pod Challenge. That was viral with the younger generation.
That did not go well.
No, I don't think that's the kind of viral moment that they were looking for. Anna, when I was on Procter & Gamble's website looking at their quote-unquote iconic brands, right? Kind of to Jeff's point, one of the things that stood out to me was that a lot of these are the brands that are kind of sitting on the shelf next to what I'm buying recently.
Yeah. And, they mentioned in announcing these cuts, economic uncertainty relating to, I think, consumer sentiment. And broadly, that is the point that I think is particularly alarming. And it's, of course, not just relative to what's happening at P&G, but if you look at the preliminary May reading of the University of Michigan's Consumer Sentiment Index. That declined 2.7% on a monthly basis to 50.8, which significantly was the second lowest level in the nearly 75-year history of the survey, they said.
Really?
Yeah.
Okay.
So think about that. 75 years of consumer sentiment. That's the Great Recession, the dot-com bubble bursting, the oil shock of the 70s, like so many things included in that time period. And this is the second lowest that has been.
That is kind of shocking.
I was shocked to hear that as well. And I think it's frankly worrying about what's to come in the near term if this is how big companies are responding, tightening up to this degree. I also saw some also worrying just to make it worse, guys.
Yeah. All right.
What's going on here? I'm usually the down and gloomy guy.
Yeah.
Like you're supposed to be the ray of sunshine.
Yeah. So not today, Jeff.
She's coming around to it. It's just we're taking the long way.
Okay.
Yeah.
No, I would like you to buckle your seatbelt.
Oh boy.
No, so this I found in 2025, employers have announced nearly 700,000 job cuts, which is up 80% from the 385,000 that were announced in the first 5 months of last year.
Whew.
So it would take just 65,000 more job cuts to surpass the total
for all of last year.
All of last year.
Oh my goodness.
Retail layoffs in particular are up nearly 300%. And, you hear about it in dribs and drabs, but to see it laid out like that is, that's scary, right?
Oh,
and
yeah.
I think if the pace continues and we see more of these stories like from P&G, especially as this uncertainty continues to impact spending, I think we're going to be in for a rough ride.
Yeah.
And as this tariff volatility moves from wait and see to becoming almost galvanized into the strategic decisions of these companies, which, it has to soon.
Mm-hmm.
So,
well, I want to say that while I have been skipping some of their iconic brands, like as a result, and it's like still because of the generic eye drop fallout, I don't buy the generic alternative on like particularly health and beauty aid products. So I'm still, getting the Crest, Old Spice, haven't got, so there's still some of it there,
No, I agree.
But the chief financial officer, Andre Schulten, said, quote, "This restructuring program is an important step towards ensuring our ability to deliver our long-term algorithm over the coming 2 to 3 years." What do you think he meant there?
Well, I think it's pretty plain. They're looking at finance. They're looking purely at the numbers and what they need to do to hit their sales numbers.
Oh, okay.
So everything else aside is kind of on the periphery.
Yeah.
They just need to plug in whatever they need to do. They know what they need to sell to hit their nut, and that's what they're going to focus on.
Yeah.
And again, that goes back to some of their core issues that a lot of people are looking at in terms of the way they're communicating the quality of these brands and what they mean to those who don't know them yet.
Yeah. Just moving the beads on the abacus right now, trying to make it work. I like very relevant terms like abacus to be used on the podcast. I think that it, really helps us connect to a younger audience, to the youth. Schulten went on to say, it does not, however, remove the near-term challenges that we currently face. And truer words, right? Like, hey, we're figuring out how it looks now, and we don't know how it's going to look tomorrow.
Yeah.
All right. Our next most popular story, billion-dollar battery factory halts BMW EV project. Automotive Energy Supply Corporation is a Japanese company that was, until very recently, building a $1.6 billion factory in South Carolina to make batteries for electric BMWs. Last Thursday, construction was stopped due to, let me know if you've heard of this one yet, quote, policy and market uncertainty. South Carolina's governor says the company may lose federal tax breaks for EV buyers and incentives for EV businesses. Oh, and then, they have that whole tariff situation as well. AESC promised to restart construction, although it didn't say when, and vowed to meet its commitment to hire 1,600 workers and invest $1.6 billion. The company is pretty pot committed. It's already some $1 billion invested in this Florence plant, and the South Carolina, the plant is supposed to sell battery cells to BMW, which is still building its own battery assembly site nearby. The construction pause is not going to change BMW's plans to open its plant in 2026. And perhaps channeling Aaron Rodgers, Governor McMaster told his constituents to just relax, as state and business leaders are talking to Trump's administration to try and work things out. Jeff, is that easier said than done?
100%.
Yeah.
But I don't disagree with him.
Yeah.
I do agree that we do need to take a pause here and not get too fired up about it, because the company has said they're going to continue.
Yeah.
They're trying to read the tea leaves, and nobody can right now. There's just so much that we don't know. So I think what I find with this story, and we've got a couple of these this week, there's just so much irony in the fact that we've got the Trump administration's big, beautiful bill and what they're trying to do there and inspiring more U.S. manufacturing, and really trying to go away from or demolish a lot of things that the Biden administration did with the Inflation Reduction Act in providing incentives for this type of manufacturing. That bill is actually hindering manufacturing in this instance because it's generating so much unknown. They just don't know what's going to happen. We've talked about some of the forecasting struggles when it comes to electric vehicles. That's just a reality of a new product. That's going to happen. But when you pile on all the other stuff, and again, we've talked about tariffs here a lot this week. We've talked about trade, supply chain disruptions, all of those things. Yeah, it's a smart move when you're talking about another $1.5 billion to say, you know what, this isn't going anywhere. Yeah, we're just going to hold on for a second. Now, the things that this also has going for it is where it's located. The geography is excellent. South Carolina is an automotive hub right now, thanks to that BMW plant in Spartanburg. The other things that they're doing here now, building a battery plant. There's a lot of good stuff happening here in South Carolina. So that's where I do agree with their governor, Governor McMaster, basically saying, we'll get it figured out. The other thing is, what is it, about $250 million in incentives that the state can pull out of if this doesn't go through. So there's a lot of working things in place. It's just frustrating because you've got two pieces of administrative dialogue that are just basically combating each other right now. And they both want the same thing, but they're doing it in such disruptive ways that it's not helping anybody.
Well, and it's very realistic. I mean, we've seen almost every automaker at this point kind of reset projections when it comes to EVs. And AESC, this isn't the first time that it's kind of taken a step back, right? It's already kind of rolled back its plans in South Carolina. There was going to be a second plant, and they were just no, I think we can do it with one. So I think that it kind of gives me a little bit more confidence that they're trying to navigate the current market, but they still plan on proceeding with the project.
Yeah, and I think it's clear that it's not just about the EV market organically, but also what happens to the tax credit. That's something that we might have an answer on in the near term. So you can see why they have pressed pause on that, because that's something that we should be able to figure that out soon. AESC company spokesperson Brad Grantham told Manufacturing Dive that the company will evaluate market conditions and anticipates it will resume construction once circumstances stabilize. We know that they intend to meet their commitment, but truly it does appear that they're waiting on some of that policy and some clarity there. To address your point around some of the fallout that's taking place from a federal level and some of the changes and how that's impacting the manufacturing sector, reports suggest that companies have canceled or downsized more than $14 billion in investments and 10,000 new jobs in clean energy and clean vehicle factories between January and May of this year. So just to give you an idea of how much damage has already been done, AESC would be in good company, honestly, if they completely threw in the towel on this project, based on what other businesses that are in the same industry have been doing. These have been battery plants and other, tied to the EV industry. And again, it's this market lumpiness, but it's also this tax credit that could completely kneecap things from a buying perspective. And just, then you're, it would be hard to that industry had so much momentum, and that would really be a challenge, right?
That was It's a big number, but I thought it was going to be bigger. Just in terms of, so it's like $14 billion in investment that has been lost as a result.
Canceled. Or downsized. So
Okay.
like, minimizing what the projected investment of something. So.
Well, so with that second factory that they were going to build, South Carolina did wind up withdrawing $110 million in funds. The company is still getting the $135 million in grants from the South Carolina Department of Commerce and another $120 million in bonds. And the agency says a construction pause won't prompt them to claw back those offers yet. So, there's still millions in taxpayer money on the table. So there are a lot of incentives for everybody to kind of like make this project move forward as long as it makes sense. If all of a sudden we kind of change the rules of the game, you can't fault a company for changing their strategy. Hopefully this 1.6 billion isn't added to the 14 that we're already tallying, 5 months this year. All right. Our most popular story this week. John Deere commits $20 billion to U.S. manufacturing. John Deere this week reiterated that it was going to spend billions of dollars on its U.S. operations in the coming years, and it refuted a report that it would freeze its domestic manufacturing. The report, first published on something called Style on Main and then picked up by MSN, suggested that the ag equipment and machinery giants would freeze U.S. production in a, quote, unprecedented shutdown. A statement issued by the company Thursday apparently sought to make everyone thaw the heck out, bluntly titling the piece, Myth Busted, John Deere is not, all caps, freezing U.S. manufacturing. The company said it wants to, quote, clear the air and that it's not shutting down U.S. manufacturing. Rather, John Deere, as announced in its most recent earnings report, is committing some $20 billion to domestic production over the next 10 years. Deere CEO John May said, quote, over the next decade, we will continue to make significant investments in our core U.S. market. This underscores our dedication to innovation and growth while staying cost competitive in a global market. According to May, nearly 80% of Deere's U.S. sales and 25% of its international sales come from domestically made products. John Deere, according to a company fact sheet, has already invested some $100 million in U.S. factories just this year. Anna, one thing that really stood out about this story to me, and we can get into it in a little bit, is that how, like it or not, companies are going to need to continue firefighting fake reports and AI-generated content. And I think that's where a lot of this came from, is that, John Deere winds up putting out this fire because of unsubstantiated claims made by some unknown publication that was then picked up by MSN. And all of a sudden everybody's reading it and John Deere's like, no, everything's fine. So they just, I understand that not a lot of new things came out of this, but just the fact that John Deere had to come out and be like, everybody calm down.
Yeah, it was strange. I don't know that we don't know if it was AI generated, right? We don't know where
it was.
Had a byline.
From a fake person.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
Putting on the tinfoil hat here, huh?
No, I'm not. Were you able to find the article?
No, I could not.
Exactly. This on MSN right now, quote, this story is unavailable. And when I was reading it, I'm like, this is AI generated dreck. And then I Googled the person, not a real person.
Wow.
Or a pseudonym, whatever, so anyway, sorry, not even a tinfoil hat. It's just, unfortunately, the new normal.
Yeah. It's, I don't, outside of that, not knowing like where this original report came from or what it was based on, I did find Deere's response a little bit funny in the way it felt like some spin to it. Mm-hmm. Whether or not, again, like no one really believed, I don't think, that Deere was going to shut down all of their U.S. production. That's not realistic.
Freeze.
Yeah, freeze. Okay.
It's not realistic to you and me, but like to a person that just comes up on their feed, as they're scrolling through news, they're like, oh my God. And it just seems like, that target has been on John Deere, and this might be something that they have to continue firefighting for a minute.
Maybe. Yeah. I don't know. I didn't know that the story was not legit. But I did think that their statement was kind of funny because they were talking about how they were committing $20 billion to U.S. manufacturing, which sounds like a really impressive number. $20 billion.
$20 billion.
And it's a lot of money, to be sure. But if you look at John Deere's operating costs, like their operating expenses are like $40+ billion every year. Yeah. And they're talking about, they were like, we're going to commit $20 billion to U.S. manufacturing over the next 10 years. So is that a lot? I mean, like they didn't even say it was new investment either.
Yeah.
They referred to it as ongoing investment. So isn't that just like keeping the lights on? They have 60
Well, that's my point. You can definitely take it that way. I mean, I don't want to take away from David's ability to run the numbers here, because I'm sure he's got this all calculated.
I ran the numbers, and this is different. It's to me, this isn't a story about the numbers and at all. It's about how, like, because of bots and trolls are everywhere, it went from like John Deere having to deal with like problematic tweets to like full blown fake news getting posted on, and like, and it's just, isn't that crazy? Isn't that crazy that like John Deere had to come out and be like, hey guys, we have more than, they said they had like more than 16 factories in the United States. I'm just like, that's a weird number. But anyway, it was crazy to me that this was a problem that they had to go out of their way and, say like, hey, here's all the money we are spending, we promise.
Well, it wasn't as exciting of a claim as I think it's meant to sound like. And then secondly, we have been covering Deere for many years. We all know that Deere is in an aggressive cost-cutting mode.
Yeah. They
have announced round after round repetitively over the last 18 months to 2 years of layoffs at their factories.
Yeah.
So it's not been a great couple of years for the company in terms of how it's being perceived in the market, in terms of its ongoing commitment to U.S. manufacturing. So if people believe this story, I mean, you can kind of see why they would,
No, I think that's why it's because there is so much around, talking about layoffs in Iowa, talking about layoffs at many different factories. So Jeff, I think that's how a story like this kind of like really picks up steam, because it seems like just the next step in what could be, bad times for John Deere.
Well, yeah. And where do those bad times come from? They come from the fact that, again, we're dealing with the same term of uncertainty.
Yep.
Farmers aren't buying stuff. John Deere has a sales problem right now. Yep. Okay. Forget anything else. This isn't like Boeing where they've got stuff falling apart. They hit a 30% drop in sales and revenue for the last quarter.
Yeah.
30%. P&G is freaking out over 2%.
Yeah.
John Deere's got 30% year over year drop. When you're dealing with that type of number and those types of issues, you couple in the layoffs that they've had in the last 2 years, that makes these stories more believable, unfortunately.
Yeah.
But it also, with John Deere coming out with this story about the $20 billion over a decade, it also masks a lot of the bigger problems here. And again, it goes back to that uncertainty. Farmers aren't buying stuff because they're not sure what's going on with their products and what's going to happen with them being able to send stuff overseas.
Correct.
They don't know what's going to happen to their prices for their crops. They don't know. So they're not investing right now.
Yeah.
To John Deere's credit, we have seen them make some investments in technology, whether it was the drone mapping software we talked about last time, some other things they've done with autonomous vehicles. There's a lot of stuff John Deere is trying to do to boost their company. But the bottom line is, if the folks who need their products aren't sure that they can afford to make that type of investment, they're not going to sell more stuff. They can't hire more people. They have to make cuts someplace.
Yeah.
So it all goes back to this cloud of uncertainty that we have hanging over everything and the trickle effect that it's having throughout our economy.
Oh, yeah.
It's impacting everything. Now, I'm not going to blame all of that on John Deere's failings here.
Yeah.
But a big part of it comes into play. There's no way it can't.
Do you think that's part of I guess John Deere's diversification strategy is that when it sees itself more as a like data and technology provider, those are things that are maybe not as cost intensive as, giant multi-million-dollar machines.
You mean from a consumer perspective?
Well, no, from the company perspective,
Definitely.
Yeah.
When you look at investing, I mean, geez, if you're going to put in make a new combine and the line and the investment that you have to make in production technology to accommodate that, that's a very different cost analysis. But at the same time, if you can sell those combines, you're not going to worry about that investment because it's going to pay off down the line.
Yeah.
If you're worried about, again, people not even questioning the quality or the desire to purchase your product, just if it's a best move so that they can make sure they still have their farm in the fall, that's a different question.
Yeah. I just wanted to add like a PSA as well. Like, and I feel like it's like the PSA we all tell our parents right now, where it's just like, hey, when you're reading something on the internet, does it pass the sniff test? You got that funny feeling in your gut where you're like, that sounds weird. There are AI content detectors. There are ways to, Google the guy on the byline or the person on the byline to see maybe if that person's not real. And I don't know. It's just I feel like there is this attack on information and good information. And unfortunately, you just have to stress that, as you're consuming information, you got to make sure that you're going to reliable resources. You need to make sure that it's good information before you start going crazy. Like we posted this on LinkedIn and people were coming out of the woodwork, just like with all their conspiracy theories. And it's just like, no, calm down. Let's all calm down. We can read it together. You know what? That's what we need to do. We need like an article club, Anna, where we read the article together. And we're all just like, we'll see how this sentence right here doesn't sound like a human wrote it. Mm-hmm. That's because a human didn't write it. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Anyway, sorry. I was just like, it reminded me of like Thanksgiving when my dad came up to me with, sorry, not my dad, a family member.
Yeah, someone.
Just a random family member came up to me with like something in his or her Facebook feed and was just like, is this real news? I'm like, no, not even.
You have to ask that. It's not real.
Yeah. In general, don't trust anything on that platform.
It's the leftover test.
Yeah.
If you have to question whether it's still good, it's not.
Yeah. Well, or you can make a soup out of it. But that's no. All right. Well, before we jump into, in case you missed it, the stories that maybe not as popular on the website, but could make a big impact on the industry going forward, we have another word from our sponsor, SugarCRM. This week's episode is brought to you by our friends at SugarCRM. If your sales team is struggling to close deals, you need to read How to Close More Deals in Manufacturing, a new guide to modern insight-driven sales. Many manufacturers sit on mountains of data about their customers. However, few sales teams leverage all this data to unlock new sales opportunities, boost pipeline output, strengthen customer relationships, and realize complementary sales add-ons. So stop missing out on new sales and download How to Close More Deals in Manufacturing right now. There is a link in the live chat as well as in the body copy. In case you missed it, stories not as popular on our sites like manufacturing.net and IEN.com, but, could be pretty important. Anna, what do you have for us this week?
I selected a story that was an interview that I did with a man named Tim Dixon. He works for Regal Rexnord, which is, I think many of you know that company, but it's a global motion control and power transmission company. They have like 50 plus brands all across the globe doing lots of cool things there. But one of the cool things that they're doing is they have implemented a very robust AI program within the company. And so the article is called How One Manufacturer Took AI to Primetime and It Worked. And a few interesting takeaways from the interview. So Tim says that in his opinion, the time for playing around with AI was last year, and that this year the stakes are higher and it's time to actually prove the value. And so I think what was interesting about this interview, and I'll let you read it, but he really does a great job of providing some detail on what their process looked like and why Regal Rexnord is committing to moving beyond the low-hanging fruit, which is like what he considers stuff that you could get out of machine learning for the last few years. He's like, there's more to AI. This is what we're doing. This is how we're using it. They're really getting into like agentic AI and what's the other one?
Generative AI.
Generative AI.
Yeah.
And you know, they have like a chat bot that they use with their external customers. They have one that they use internally. Oh. So one of the examples he gave was like you could talk to the internal chat bot and say, I have a meeting with Tim Dixon this afternoon. What does he do? How should I prepare for that meeting? Or, you know, those types of questions, or even HR stuff like how many vacation days do I have left? Stuff that is eliminating wasted time, sending emails to people that you can get your questions like right away.
Yeah.
But what I loved about it is he was very specific. Mm-hmm. And so I know that there's a lot of companies out there that, you know, they're wondering how AI could be a benefit to their business. They don't really know how they would use it. Look at this Q&A, and he'll give you some really interesting ideas to at least think about.
Yeah.
But yeah, it was a very insightful and interesting conversation.
That's what I really liked about it is that for so many people in this industry, like AI is still this nebulous thing that people are trying to grab onto and participate in.
Very abstract.
Yeah.
Like, yeah.
And he just gave real world examples. You know, one quote that I loved in the interview was that he said, "I'm trying to prove that AI, particularly generative AI, is actually providing growth and demonstrating that growth in any number of ways." So it was, you know, this was almost like multiple case studies at once, right?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And so I was surprised. I feel like it's starting to pick up traction on the site. And I feel like if we gave it another week, this would be in the top 5 because it's getting a lot of traction on LinkedIn as well, because this is a conversation everybody's trying to have. Jeff, what did you think of the interview with Mr. Dixon?
I mean, I think it's great. And I think what we see in manufacturing and the industrial sector is more of this type of messaging around AI in terms of the practical applications it has, as opposed to saying, hey, isn't this great? Look what you can do with ChatGPT. It's so cool.
Yeah.
You know, looking at seeing how we actually can apply it in ways that are going to help us save time, you know, refine processes, all those things. The things that Anna pointed out there that he mentioned specifically, those are universal. I mean, everybody can use it for those things. And the other thing that it does then is it offers an opportunity to really expand somebody's thought process into what does this lead to? What is the thing that leads to the thing when it comes to AI and how you can apply it and use it? And I think that's where manufacturing is ahead of a lot of other industries. You know, I talk to a lot of cybersecurity people, and they're talking about AI and how the bad guys are using it, how the good guys can using it. And a lot of it is still in the periphery. It's still kind of out there and it's theoretical. It's great to see more concrete examples of how it can be used.
No, it's impressive. And I don't know, I was, you know, a lot of times when you try and work on some of these Q&As with people, like, you know, you really got to dig to get some of the meat off the bone, you know, and he gave it to you. It was great.
Yeah.
So really enjoyed this piece. So my, in case you missed it, this week was about another incident that stemmed from a tragic accident and sort of some of the fallout that came as a result. My article was about Fabcon Precast getting a max penalty after a worker was crushed in a concrete mixer. On June 6th, 2020, a 20-year-old named Zachary Ledbetter was working as a batch operator at Fabcon Precast. It's a company that manufactures precast concrete panels at this plant in Ohio. Ledbetter had only been on the job for about 6 months. Batch operators at Fabcon operate and clean the facility's only concrete mixer. Ledbetter was severely injured after a broken component caused the mixer door to close on his head, and then he died 5 days later. Well, this week, Fabcon was ordered to pay a $500,000 fine, the statutory maximum. The company will also serve a 2-year organizational probation and comply with a safety compliance plan. Now, I chose this story this week because a lot of times we talk about these stories and we're talking about very small penalties that aren't going to make real change in the industry or with the individual company. And Jeff, when I saw this story, a number like $500,000, I think that really makes some change.
You'd certainly hope. I mean, tragic. I mean, geez, 20-year-old.
Yeah.
we always talk about how this goes back to the culture of the organization and the things that they're doing from a safety perspective and not rushing as much. I mean, we just talked about it with the airplane maintenance processes and stuff like that. Putting more of this on paper, having a better plan in place is the first step.
Yeah.
Following through. That's the hard part.
Yeah.
You know, I was talking to some friends lately and we're, just going over some things in general. Asking for help is hard.
Yeah.
Accepting that help is even more difficult.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that kind of comes into play when we talk about a lot of things from a safety perspective. In environments like this.
No, and it's, you have no idea. I mean, he was only 6 months on the job, so you don't know how long that part was broken. Did he ever know that's how it was supposed to work? Or had he only known that that was the way of doing business or doing his job? Special Agent in Charge, Megan Howell of the U.S. Department of Labor Office of the Inspector General of the Great Lakes region said, quote, this sentence highlights our steadfast commitment to continue working with OSHA and our law enforcement partners to hold accountable those who jeopardize worker safety. Federal law makes it a Class B misdemeanor to willfully fail to follow an OSHA safety standard, particularly when the failure causes an employee's death. And just a note that this misdemeanor is the only federal criminal charge covering such safety violations. But Anna, sometimes, you get so used to seeing stories like this, press releases from OSHA or the Justice Department or the Labor Department, and seeing kind of a small number attached, $20,000, $40,000, and then it's negotiated down. But this was after a guilty plea, so this is a penalty that will be paid. It won't be negotiated down, most likely.
Yeah.
When you see that, is that, understanding that comes after such a tragic event, but that, really the labor office is, maybe trying to make some change?
Yeah, to get it's different when it's an OSHA inspection and OSHA's issuing a fine. And then, yes, of course, those often get negotiated down, as you said. But the law enforcement partner component of this really kind of ratchets things up. So you kind of wonder because we see stuff that seems very egregious all the time, and DOJ is not involved, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I wonder what triggers that.
Yeah, I agree with you. I reached out to both the company and I reached out for more information about everything and just didn't hear back. So if we do get more information that could shed a little bit more light on that, will we see more penalties like this? Will we see a little bit more stricter enforcement?
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. That remains to be seen. Jeff, what's your in case you missed it this week?
Picked an article talking about some recent executive orders, which our president really enjoys doing.
Mm-hmm.
The name of the story is New Drone Orders Aim to Counter Threats While Encouraging Flying Cars and Supersonic Flights. As soon as I saw flying cars, I knew Anna was going to want to talk about that.
I saw this. I
Yeah.
saw this.
So the 3 executive orders will encourage the FAA to expedite rules to allow companies to use drones beyond their operators' line of sight, while also imposing restrictions meant to help protect against terrorism, espionage, and public safety threats. So I think 2 of these executive orders, I think everybody, for the most part, will get on board with. Mm-hmm. The first one simply said, don't fly so close to important stuff. Okay, yeah. When it comes to different important government buildings, safety, security buildings, keep the drones out of there. I think everybody can pretty much get on board with that. Mm-hmm. The other thing that it did is because we've come a long way with supersonic flight, it looks to abolish a lot of those noise restrictions, or that basically the restrictions for flying over certain areas. They had their origins in the fact that supersonic flight created that boom, that sound. That really isn't an issue anymore. Mm-hmm. So it's alleviating that. It's basically taking away some of those restrictions in terms of where supersonic aircraft can be operated.
Yeah.
So when we look to take the next step and really enhance the speed of air travel, this should open things up a little bit. Mm-hmm. And one of the things that the article points to is this could help a lot of these developers of these non-traditional flying vessels in terms of some of the things that they're working on and developing as well. I think most people, being primarily because we're not there yet, can probably get on board with that and say, from a product development perspective, I'm cool with this. Mm-hmm. I think this will help develop some of those technologies. Anna probably isn't one of those people.
Yeah.
But
I mean, Anna, how do you feel about the phrase non-traditional flying vessels?
I mean, it's we just talked for a long time about how the American public was like losing faith in, aviation And so I think like let's be careful. I don't want to like
Yeah.
knee jerk decide that this is regulatory, so therefore should be abolished. I think the White House gave the FAA an 18-month timeline to establish like new noise thresholds for takeoff, landing, and other supersonic aircraft requirements. Again, just seems like sort of arbitrary. I just worry that if you're, we talked about like the concerns we see behind like rushing things, especially in this industry. I hope that these are not capricious choices, but
No, agreed. And I hope we're not going the whole, to make an omelet, you got to break some eggs. I hope we're not going that route,
we are breaking a lot of eggs. I do think we are.
Okay. Well, maybe less.
Well, I think it is just to open up because, again, we're looking at it was a speed restriction before.
Yeah.
We're taking that away so we can develop some of these things. And that includes like flying cars or other things that can be used for cargo transportation. I think it's a good idea.
No, boomless supersonic flight. I mean, I think it was Boom Supersonic that recently unveiled that they had achieved that. So, I mean, I understand when like some rules are no longer relevant. But it'll be interesting to, it'll just be interesting to be able to like grab onto one of these things and actually hold on to it and like track the story for a couple of days, without like 9 other things popping up.
True,
Just,
yeah.
It's definitely, the strategy's definitely been deployed.
The third executive order, I think this one's a little bit more interesting. The first part of it is pretty straightforward in terms of the Trump administration saying it's going to prioritize American-made drones in federal contracts. Again, makes sense. We've got some catch up to do with some of the Chinese competitors. They, when you look at a company like DJ2 or DJ1, excuse me, they're ahead of us right now.
Yeah.
So, and they're very popular. Is it DJ1 or DJI? DJI, my apologies. So definitely they're on the precipice. So, you can agree with the federal government wanting to buy American-made drones.
Yeah.
Makes sense.
But there are a lot of cool things happening in the drone industry that we can't talk about yet, but they're coming soon and they're exciting. Like that's all I got to say is like covering parts of that industry and just kind of every once in a while getting a glimpse underneath the hood as to what's going on. And it's pretty incredible. Like the next generation of drone technology is going to blow your minds.
The other part of that, sorry.
Oh, sorry. No.
The FAA has generally prohibited drones from operating outside of operators' line of sight because of safety concerns, but they've always issued a lot of waivers, stuff that feels like, okay, for you, we'll let that go.
Oh, okay.
This executive order says, hey, look, let's make sure you can see what you're flying.
I don't feel like that's a big ask.
No, I don't think so either.
I'm fine with that.
Like as a person who has broken every remote control device I've ever operated, makes a lot of sense for me.
I thought this article was interesting because it's drones, especially with stuff that's going on in Ukraine right now, they're getting a lot of attention. There's a lot of technology, like you referenced, in terms of the expanded application and use of them. So the fact that we do have, the president of the United States issuing these executive orders in terms of opening up some different opportunities, we'll see where it goes.
We got a lot of drones in areas they're not supposed to be in. We've got a lot of drones that are unaccounted for. We got a lot of drones that are unlicensed, and it's I don't know. Talk about a wild west right now that could could be reined in a little bit more. All right. Well, before we get out of here this week, let's do our final thoughts. Anna, do you have a final thought for us this week?
Sure. So today is the last day of school at my kids' school, and tonight I am doing something that is unprecedented.
Oh.
For me personally.
Okay.
I told the kids that we could have ice cream for dinner.
Yes.
And because I feel like I am still fun, I would like to advertise that fact to the world.
Yeah.
Ice cream for dinner.
Are you going to put like broccoli on it?
Nope.
Okay. I mean, that sounds great.
Yeah.
So what time? Like 5:30? You probably bought too much and you need to get it out of the house.
The more the merrier.
Yeah, right? I mean,
do you have to run it by anyone? Like, are you allowed to have ice cream for dinner? I mean, I can only say yes to like my own kids.
So are
you like making them put fruit on it or just pretty much whatever they want to do?
No, they'll eat later if they want to, but it's the last day of school. So
that is awesome.
I'm trying to be fun for once.
No, I think, cool mom alert. Everyone watch
Cool mom alert one time. Yeah.
No, I think that, honestly, I think that's so important. Like sometimes it's just like, you got to make sure you're putting the right stuff in your body. You got to make sure you're getting to bed on the right time, and there are just, you know what, there are some experiences that you need to have that are after bedtime. There are some things that you need to have that aren't necessarily the best thing for you. But I don't know. I think that those are an important part of a kid's upbringing. Like,
every once in a while.
Okay, like if next week when we're shooting the podcast, you're like, hey guys, we've been having ice cream dinner for the last 7 days. It's getting weird. I'm starting to see trails. My final thought this week is just another PSA to stretch regularly.
Wow.
Did you get injured again?
No, I didn't get injured, but like it was just one thing. I'm much more active in the summer. I'm much more sedentary in the winter, and coming out of this winter is like, I don't even know. Like I'm further behind than I was in COVID. It was like coming out of COVID, I'm just like, how does your body work again? And it was just, I enjoy being active with the kids outside. It was great. It was actually my mother-in-law said, you were actually tan last year. And that was the first time I saw that. So it's good that you're in the sun with your kids. I'm like, well, I'll shoot for that again this year. Thanks.
Not sure how to take that one.
Yeah, it's good to know that it's possible for me. And I don't know, just get out, be active, but make sure that you're taking care of yourself because it'll roll up on you when you least expect it. And the older you get, when something pops, it doesn't always go back in.
True.
As easily. You're just like, never had that one before. Good.
Old man stretching. It's real.
It's real and it's great. I wouldn't call it old man stretching. I'd just call it, active lifestyle stretching. A semi-active, 20% active. Jeff, what's your final thought this week?
So this past weekend went to a graduation party. Family graduation party. Was very nice, good time, all that kind of stuff. But also thinking about it, my kids are gone. Like they're all in college now. Won't have to do that kind of stuff anymore. And it just kind of got me thinking about a little bit where you guys are when you talk about running with the kids and doing all that stuff. And I've never heard anybody voice these like negative comments really about it, but just sort of a reminder, like as parents, we get to do that stuff. We don't have to do that stuff.
Yeah.
I'm not saying I'm wanting to go back to that right now because I don't necessarily feel the need to start running kids to play things all over during the weekends and the week and stuff. But it's a very positive thing that we get to do as parents and to sort of just embrace it. It goes away fast.
Yeah.
That's, one of all the things people tell you about being a parent, the it goes fast is the truest. You turn around and you turn around and your oldest is 7 and you're just like, what? How'd you get that tall? And can you carry me yet? No, actually, on the graduation note, I did want to say congratulations to my niece, Lily, who graduated today. I'm very proud of you. You will never see this. And that's still okay, because I'm just putting it out there for you. All right. Well, before we get out of here this week, please make sure to like, share, and subscribe to the podcast. You can also help us out a lot by leaving the podcast a positive review on whatever platform you use. Even a simple thumbs up on YouTube will really help us a lot. Even a thumbs up on the shorts. Check out the shorts. Give those a thumbs up. If you want to email the podcast, you can reach any of us at Anna, Jeff, or David at IEN.com with email the podcast in the subject line. Subscribe to our daily newsletter. Make sure you get it delivered to your inbox first. And subscribe to us on YouTube at IEN Magazine so you can join us every week when we go live. All right, for Jeff Ranke and Anna Wells, I'm David Manti. This is the Today in Manufacturing podcast, and we will see you next week.